Hello, I'm Yalsari. Welcome to this Crocus tutorial. These beautiful, tiny and delicate flowers are actually more challenging to paint than they seem. The link to the free line drawing and the list of all the supplies used in this video are in the description box below. I'll start by adding a very small amount of quinacridone magenta, followed by Winsor violet milk-like consistency on the outer edges of the petal. And then in the center, I dropped in a small amount of Winsor lemon, tea-like consistency, so that it has a soft color and not a strong glow. I'm focusing on only one petal at a time in order to try and capture the beauty and nuances of each petal. So with this flower, I will show you a little bit more close up. First, applying a good glaze of water. Then I'm coming in with Winsor violet on my brush, milk-like consistency, and dropping the paint on the edges of the petal. Then dropped in some quinacridone magenta and helping it to mix with Winsor violet on paper. I'm adding in some more of the Winsor violet on the edges and pulling the paint a little bit towards the center so that the edges look more natural. And then finally adding some very pale, very dilute Winsor lemon at the base of the petal. And then I'm using my damp brush to spread the paint and soften the edges. Then with some more of the Winsor violet, I defined the edges at the base. On this petal here, I'm first painting only the part of the petal which folds upwards with a milk-like consistency of Winsor violet. And then let it dry before painting the inner part of the petal. Here I'm applying a very diluted Prussian blue and I want it to look almost transparent. Coming back to this petal, I applied a very small amount of dilute Prussian blue, and then on the top edge of the petal, I added Winsor violet, milk-like consistency, and used my brush to spread the paint and soften the edges. Now I'm removing the masking fluid. I don't have orange So if you have orange, you don't need this step. So I'm going to pick up some cadmium red and mix it with cadmium yellow to create a warm orange for the stamens. The paint consistency is milk-like, so I'm going to paint it wet and dry. So the paper is dry and I'm directly applying the mixture I just created on the area that was covered with masking fluid to create a little bit of variation in the values. I'm going to add a little bit more red in the orange mixture. The stem of the crocus has a very fine, thin sheet or layer which wraps around the stem and the leaves. So I'm using a very diluted Winsor lemon. Then I took a very watery sap green and applied it on the edges. Then I dropped a very small amount of queen magenta just on the top of this part. Since green is the complementary color of red, so I'm mixing quinacridone magenta with some permanent sap green to create some neutrals. And I'm using this mixture on some of the areas to create some shadows. Now to this same mixture, I added some more of sap green and I'm using this mixture to paint the small grass on the right. I laid down the paint on one side and using a slightly damp brush, I softened the edges. Now let's move on to this bigger leaf which is facing towards us. So we can see foldings on either sides of this leaf, but first let's paint the central part with a very light tea-like consistency of Winsor lemon. Then I took a thicker consistency of the mixture of queen magenta and sap green and applied on the folded areas of this leaf. If you want to be on the safer side, you can first allow the yellow wash dry completely and then apply this mixture. Now let's get ready to paint the snow. For this I'll be using the wet on wet technique. So I'll apply a layer of abundant water but with no puddles on all this area and in between the leaves. So I'll start with a small amount of tea-like consistency of indigo. Now dropping in some Prussian blue, also very dilute. Some more of that very dilute indigo. some more of the Prussian blue, but there's too much paint in it, so I'm using a clean damp brush to lift some paint. And now I'm using a very dilute tea-like consistency of Winsor violet to create some shadows on the snow. Now dropping in some dilute milk-like consistency of burnt umber and using a damp brush to soften the edges. And now coming in with the cream-like consistency of indigo followed by a milk-like consistency of sepia. So both indigo and sepia are going to help us to create depth. I'm going to turn around my paper to soften the edges of the paint deposited on the stem. And here's the finished painting. This is the color study I did in my new watercolor block. It's Bao Hong. I'm testing it out. I have done only one painting, this one, so it's early to say anything about it. Usually I don't sign my color studies, and I always signed my finished paintings with this Uniball acid-free pen. But lately I'm practicing to sign my paintings with this paintbrush so that I can choose what color to sign in. This one is in indigo. I feel like it creates more harmony between signature and the painting. What is your favorite way of signing your paintings? Please let me know in the comment section below. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please like, share and subscribe if you haven't already. And I have a very cute robin tutorial if you're interested. I will put the link on the screen. Bye for now.